Now, my friend Brian Alexander, who I think may still be the sexploration columnist from MSNBC, has written several books, and a couple of 3 years ago, he contacted me and told me about this particular author he was working with to co-write a book about how that brain chemicals affect the things that we do, and particularly how they affect what we do, how we operate, how we react, etc., when it comes to matters such as love and sex. So, Kimberly, in your master's study and in your doctoral PhD studies, do you guys talk about this much?
We've talked about it a little bit in the doctorate of psychology, not at all in my master's program, but it's something that I've taken a personal interest in as well. So as much as I wish I was a neuroscientist, I am not. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. We're going to talk about it from a very easy to understand human level, and it may not be completely perfectly humanistically accurate of how it happens in our bodies, but
we'll get close.
We'll get close. It's good really enough for our purposes today.
Well, in other words, this will be in layman terms.
Yes, absolutely. And, it just is really fascinating how much we are not aware of how the chemicals in our body are driving our behaviors more than our conscious decisions are. So that's why I believe this is a very pertinent topic for relationship radio.
Sometimes you hear people talk about things such as love at first sight. The second I saw her, I was in love with her. If the other person has the same reaction when they first see you, we call that chemistry. Why? Because it's chemical. It means that the very sight of that person, and we can look into all kinds of substructures here, but the very sight of that person actually triggers certain chemicals in your brain that attract you to that person. And so that's what people sometimes refer to as love at first sight, because it can be overpowering, extremely strong. And like I said, if it happens with both, if it had at the same time, then you have two people that come together, and the next thing you know, we're madly in love with each other. We've only known each other for 7 hours, but we are madly in love with each other. And it really has to do with brain chemicals.
That's right. So specifically in that type of situation, so when you're first meeting someone, the brain chemicals that I know of that are highly involved in this process are going to be dopamine, because dopamine, for the terms of our podcast, the way to think about it is the anticipation chemical. So a lot of people call it the pleasure chemical. It's not actually the pleasure chemical, because once you get what you're seeking, the dopamine goes away. So that's why it's something, you're in a constant need of seeking it. It's this, and that's why it's all about anticipation, because once you get it, the dopamine goes away and you have to anticipate something else. So dopamine is definitely going to be involved in this, but I also believe that the male and female hormones are going to be involved in this, because especially when you're talking about first attraction to someone, especially if it's in person, then there's going to be, from the studies that I've seen, certain parts of a woman's menstrual cycle where she's more attractive to a man with higher testosterone, and a man's testosterone levels, which can lead to pheromones and things that can be of interest to a woman.
Yeah. And they actually tried to capture that with some of the perfumes and stuff a few years ago, but that kind of died out, it seems. I mean, people don't talk a lot about that anymore. So a lot of things are happening that are not operating in the conscious part of our brain. It's being driven back there. And we know that if two people begin to touch each other, now touching can sometimes be by words, meaning I'm saying words that you find very encouraging to you, that lead you to feel warm about me, then those very words can start releasing oxytocin into the system. And if we hold hands, more oxytocin released into the system. If we hug each other, more oxytocin, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the greatest amount of oxytocin released into the body occurs at childbirth. So if a woman has a baby, the chemical that starts the labor is oxytocin, this very strong bonding chemical, because that's what oxytocin does. It actually bonds. And if you think, well, why would that be the chemical that starts labor? Well, having watched my wife deliver our children, I think it should be a bonding chemical, because I saw the pain she went through to deliver those children. And I think the oxytocin makes her want to hug the child rather than beat the child up for hurting her like it just did. And so oxytocin is bonding. But other than at childbirth, the greatest release of oxytocin in a human being, male or female, is at orgasm. And it goes into the body in two different ways. It goes into the bloodstream as a hormone, and it also goes into the autonomic nervous system. And it's an extremely strong bonding chemical. So that even in sex, that two people bond more and more with each other. The more they hold hands, the more they cuddle, the more they talk nicely to each other, etc. So oxytocin is powerful. But let's talk more about this dopamine thing.
Yeah.
Because that's where the real interest comes for most people.
It's fascinating. So dopamine is the opposite of serotonin. So people have probably heard these two, especially in the past couple of months or years. They have become more popular in pop psychology. So serotonin is the calming chemical. And actually, serotonin is what further down the line. So I believe the precursor to serotonin is going to be tryptophan, and the postcursor to serotonin is going to be melatonin. So this is what actually leads us to be able to sleep every single night. One way that you can get more serotonin into your body is actually by seeing sunlight early in the morning, and it's connected to our circadian rhythm as well. So there's a lot that serotonin does to regulate us in many different ways. Also, the majority of serotonin receptors that we have are in our gut. Fascinating. All right.
Yeah, there's definitely a mind-gut connection. Very
definitely
powerful.
a mind-gut
Very
connection. So when we talk about falling madly in love, or sometimes you'll hear us in talking about limerence, but when people begin to fall in love in this process, we typically see that serotonin is going to go down. They're no longer feeling calm. Dopamine is going to go up because they are highly anticipating this relationship, being with this person. It's all they want to think about. Even when we think about all the things about limerence, right? You're thinking about the person 80 to 85% of your waking hours. You're not able to eat as much because all you want to do is be with this person. You have you just want to be with them. Again, it's anticipation. And we also know that limerence fades out over a period of time, because at some point, dopamine is going to achieve what it feels like it wanted to achieve, and it's going to go down, which is not a bad thing for a relationship, but for the chemicals in our body, dopamine wants to have something to achieve. And so dopamine doesn't just increase for relationships. This is what drives us to crave pleasurable foods. It's what drives us to achieve goals. It's what drives us to do anything that we want to anticipate. Dopamine is the driving force behind it.
So as I'm grilling that steak and it's sizzling, it's the anticipation that gets me all salivating, etc. Right. And if a couple is dating, the anticipation of the date as you go through the day and get closer to the time actually builds and builds the dopamine. And during the date, dopamine kind of settles down because you're there.
Right.
And so in an affair, then dopamine gets very high and people get very excited when they're anticipating the tryst.
Yes.
I'm going to meet you at a certain place and I know what's going to happen there, or at least I expect what's going to happen there. And in that process is what makes it so blooming powerful. Mm-hmm. But serotonin, there's kind of a negative when serotonin starts decreasing. It does increase passion. There's no doubt about it. But it also increases. A lack of serotonin increases fear, worry,
yes,
even depression.
And that's why they're called SSRIs, serotonin or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, because it's trying to get more serotonin into your brain so that you can think clearer and make smarter decisions. So dopamine is not the chemical of wisdom.
No.
It is the chemical of
anticipating pleasure.
Which is not always going to be the smart thing to do.